Today we have here in the studio Dr. Kelly Robinson and Dr. Emily Kane here from the College of Sciences, School of Biological Sciences. And we are here to talk about crawfish. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me.
So it's, I would say, peak crawfish season here in Louisiana, or getting there. We're in the midst of it, and producers here supply 90% of the country's crawfish. And I want to talk about your research, but before that, just kind of on a broad level, why is crawfish such a touchstone here? I know you're both scientists, but in your work, why do you feel like it's such a big deal here in Louisiana?
I'll start on that. I think it's because it's it brings together family. It brings together community. A crawfish boil, by its very nature, is highly social. You gather around a big table. You're talking. You're peeling. You're eating. You're sitting. You're resting. You get up and you get your second helping. It's like our spring Thanksgiving. It's a cornucopia of seafood.
I love that.
Yeah, I guess I'll say that I didn't grow up here. I've only been in Louisiana for about 5 years now. But I grew up in Maryland, and blue crab is a huge thing. And so I see a lot of parallels
Absolutely.
with that. And what Kelly says is, it's every time there's a big birthday celebration or something, let's go out for crabs. So I think there's a lot of family and there's a lot of culture surrounding eating crawfish.
Yeah, beautiful. And now I know, like I said, we're here to talk about your research, and you have funding from the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. And it's not, I said we're here to talk about crawfish. We are, but it's also about carp, the invasive species. So can you share a little bit about your research and kind of how that came to be?
Sure, I'll get started on that. So the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries is very motivated to help manage invasive carp, which is a fish species that's in our rivers. These fish are probably most famous for jumping out of the water when disturbed by like a boat motor. Mm-hmm. They have been problematic in the upper Mississippi Basin for a couple decades now, but they finally have migrated down to our neck of the woods. And so they're trying to figure out ways to manage them. So these fish are filter feeders, which means they basically open their mouths and eat everything in the river. And
everything's small enough.
That's true. They can fit in their mouths.
Yeah.
So they can be competitors with native fishes for common prey. And so, we want to have there's concern about managing them. And so one of the ways that they're trying to do that is incentivize a market for a fishery.
Okay, so fishing the carp.
Yeah, fishing the carp out.
Okay. So, and the tie-in for the crawfish is that then it's incentivizing people to fish.
So crawfish, they are collected and harvested in traps in farm ponds, also in the basin, right? You'll put out a pillow trap, and you have to bait that trap with something to attract the crawfish. And so fishermen or folks in the basin will either use raw fish bait, so that can be menhaden, commonly known as pogie, gizzard shad, pieces of gizzard shad. Buffalo is another kind of cut fish bait. And then there's also artificial baits. These are dry pellets. They look like range tubes, kind of like cattle feed. Mm-hmm. And those are made with fish meal, so basically dried fish that's pelletized and things like that gets in the trap. Across all these baits, they're stinky. That's the goal. Crawfish like stinky things, right? So if crawfish like things like pogie and gizzard shad, let's try carp, see if they're attracted to the carp.
So that's where it comes in. And I know fieldwork is really a big piece of this research. So can you share a little bit about that fieldwork and what you've been doing out there?
I guess, Kelly, you've been doing most of the field work. I went out with you once, and I just took pictures.
Emily has been leading the in-lab controlled studies.
Okay, so it's both. It's the field work and the lab work.
Right.
Working in unison.
So because when you're in the field, you have a lot of uncontrolled variables, weather, other things that the crawfish want to eat, crawfish predators, bycatch, and all these things. And so I brought Emily in her lab to help us with controlled behavior studies so that we could pair those two to make sure that we were seeing the same outcomes.
I see.
Yes.
I see. So you have crawfish in your lab.
Well, not currently, but we did.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we're done with those projects, and the student that's working on it is analyzing all of the data right now.
Wow.
So, yeah. But it's nice because we could do very controlled, one crawfish in a tank, 2 baits on either side of the tank. Which one does it go to? And there's a lot of variation there, but it does seem like we're maybe getting some preferences, or at least it's not really, doesn't seem any different than some of the other fish baits.
Okay, because I was going to ask you that. Any sneak peeks at the results that you could share?
Yeah, we're still, there's a lot of videos. I think he tested 90 crawfish and, 2 trials apiece. So it's like 180 GoPro videos that are filming for 3 hours. So there's a lot of data that he's going through. But from what we've looked at so far, it looks like it's at least not any worse than the other kinds of baits in the lab.
Okay, wow.
And that's kind of an unusual question for scientists to ask. Usually we're seeking contrasts, right? Mm-hmm. Is A different than B? And in this case, we're actually asking, does the carp attract crawfish just as well as the other things that farmers and fishermen are using?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I think what's also cool that we're trying to see is, we have a little bit better control over sex ratios that were tested and things like that. And so trying to see, for example, I think he already has some differences based on whether it was a male or a female being tested. And so that might relate back to what we see in the field and some of the patterns in terms of when the crawfish are hibernating and when they're not, and whether it's male or female, and whether those preferences maybe shift across the season. So we can add some of the mechanistic explanations of what they're seeing in the field.
Absolutely.
And I know you were talking about students. How do students kind of play into this, and why is that an important part of this project?
Students are hugely important to this work. Could not have accomplished this science without my students. So this project is supporting at least 3 students. Not to mention a number of undergraduate researchers who are helping with the fieldwork and processing of samples and things like that. So this is a very student-driven project. My graduate students, they're the ones who go out and in the morning put on the waders and bait the traps and out there pushing the boat. And then they have to go out and fish and record everything. And I get to stay in the shed.
Especially when it's raining.
And help them count the crawfish. Ethan Horn, who has been instrumental in this project, he was actually the undergrad who very much started it and is now a master's student on it. I think he just defended his proposal last week.
Woo, congrats, Ethan.
Yay. He has measured over 6,000 individual crawfish.
No way. Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah, he's really something. Yeah. I think I'll add to that I think just in general, I think Kelly and I maybe have a similar perspective that I think students are just important in general in research. And no matter what we do, at least for me, I try to find a way to involve as many students as want to be involved in it. Mm-hmm. And so the Crawfish Project is currently funding a master's student in my lab. And he wasn't intending on coming here and doing that as a master's, but then he got involved in it and then has switched over to doing that for the master's. So, it gave him an opportunity that we didn't expect at the beginning either. So I think just anybody who's interested student-wise, I love getting people involved in the research. Mm-hmm. And you can't do it without them.
No.
There's no way. I don't have enough time in the day.
Yeah.
And I don't want to. I've put my time in the field. And if I can sit in the shed with Kelly sometimes and, have a mimosa or...
Yeah. I'm sure the crawfish too. Fishing is not the worst thing you have to do as a student.
No, it is not. And I really
They're hard days, though. There can be hard days.
There can be hard days. And when you start a new project, there's a lot of iteration in terms of you find problems you never expected. And so the first few field days can be quite long because you're like, well, that did not go as we expected. We have to make an adjustment here. For example, I get too excited about data, and I told them to measure all the crawfish in the traps, and then that took way too long.
Because how many crawfish was that?
Well, we were measuring 100 crawfish per trap, and we were there till 9 o'clock at night.
Oh.
And in fact, it was my husband who was the sound of reason, and he's a man who works hard, and he said, Kelly, you need to come home. Please send your students home.
So your husband is a crawfish farmer. So that was that collaboration, that, sort of like having that real world piece important to this project?
It has been such an important, basically, industry academic partnership. So I got all the crawfish for undergraduate work from him. And he's a wholesaler, so he gets crawfish from a variety of fishermen across, or crawfish farmers, across St. Landry Parish. But we've been using his ponds as our experimental sites. He has been, I get to use his equipment. Actually, last Valentine's Day, I got a shipping container as a present to store all my science gear in. Very romantic.
Jealous.
And I think I'm assuming, but I guess it's a question more. It's beneficial for businesses to have this research. I mean, theoretically, if what your hypothesis is comes true, this would be a beneficial.
Yeah. So I actually had somebody call me from out of the blue, one of the local crawfish farmers down in Vermilion Parish, and he said, "Where can I get some of these carp?" And I said, "I'm sorry, they're not for sale right now." And he said that he had used some previously, and he said, "I'm really open to this, and I want to know when you have these carp products."
Wow.
So he just called me out of the blue on my office phone.
That's
so
amazing.
I think there's definitely an industry desire for this.
Yes. And I know you're also working with the team from Nichols. How did that collaboration come to be?
Chris Von Billion is our collaborator at Nichols, and he is a crawfish ecologist. That is his expertise. And so he's leading the portion of the project that's focused on fishing in the basin, so like wild-caught crawfish.
Okay. And it's a similar test with the carp.
Yes, we're trying to make sure we're doing everything the same in the basin as we do in the pond so that we can make a really solid comparison.
Okay. And are they kind of on a similar timeline as you are?
A little bit. They start fishing a little later than
Okay.
us because they have to wait for the river to flood up,
Okay.
right? So they're affected by water levels. And for that reason also, they actually get to fish longer than us. They'll probably end in like June, July, because again, it's dictated by the river levels, and at that time, usually the farmers are starting to take the water out of their ponds.
I see. And then I know you probably have a next phase of this. What are you kind of looking ahead to? What's the next part of your research for this?
Well, I think my job is done.
Emily did a great job.
Packing up the crawfish.
Well, hopefully the student will graduate in the next year, and we've got other projects. So I'm not actually a crawfish biologist. I'm more of a fish biologist, but anything wet, really.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of and we do a lot more organismal things, so more on the behavior side, and so that's where we came in. So I think the project has shifted a little bit more to more of the field work at this point. So I think my job will be done now. So it'll just be Kelly.
I can drag her out to help measure crawfish sometimes.
I will. I'll do it.
But in the next phase, we are working with a new feed mill to basically make a artificial bait that I was talking about, that pelletized bait, that's more aligned with what is available commercially right now. So farmers, they really are hesitant to things that are different. They don't like change. And so we want to make a product that is something that they're familiar with, right? Is close. And so we've gotten that more aligned now in this next phase, and we're going to be testing different percentages of carp fish meal in that pellet. So the idea is, is it more attractive at 10, 15, 7%? Like, what's the variability?
I see. Interesting. Well, anything else before we go about the project or just about crawfish? I know it's a topic people love to talk about.
I would just say, please enjoy crawfish. Go out, visit your local crawfish retail space and buy yourself a pound or two and get your friends.
Right. And thanks for supporting LDWF, because they're the ones who are supporting us doing this work.
Yep.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We're so glad that you're doing this work, and thank you for being here today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.